Rejected Omega's first heat hits. Alpha King finds her touching herself, moaning his name. At the heart of the kingdom stood the Alpha King, feared, respected, and alone. His name was Kael Varin, ruler of the northern Pax, crowned by bloodline and curse. And far below his castle, beyond the iron gates and frozen rivers, lived a rejected Omega who believed the world had forgotten her. Her name was Elara. Elara had learned early that silence was safer than hope. She was born under a pale moon, marked by the elders as weak. Her scent was soft, her presence quiet. When she came of age, no pack claimed her. No alpha stepped forward, no bond formed. And so she was cast aside, given shelter but no belonging, protection but no name. Rejected, they called her, not cruelly, not kindly, simply as a fact. She lived in a small stone house at the edge of the forest, where the trees leaned close as if to listen. Each day, she worked with herbs and cloth, helping where she could, asking for nothing. Each night she stared at the moon and wondered what fate had planned for someone like her, because deep inside something was changing. It began as warmth beneath her ribs, not pain, not sickness, a slow fire that woke her in the night and made her heart beat too fast. The elders had warned her once long ago. Even rejected Omegas awaken, they said. When the time comes, do not fight it. The body remembers what the mind was denied. But Elara had laughed then, bitter and small. Who would answer a call meant for no one? Now, as the fire spread through her veins, she was no longer laughing. She pressed her hand to her chest, breathing slowly, trying to stay calm. The room felt too quiet, the air too thick. Outside, the wind howled like something searching. She whispered into the dark, not knowing why. Please make it stop. But fate does not stop once it begins. High above, in the Blackstone Castle, King Kael stood alone before a tall window. The moonlight touched his face, silver against shadow. His crown lay untouched on the stone table behind him. He had not worn it in days. Sleep had abandoned him. For weeks now, something had been wrong. His senses were sharp to the point of pain. Sounds carried too far. Scents lingered too long. His heart beat as if waiting for a battle that never came. And tonight, there were many Omegas in the kingdom, but none bound to him. He had rejected the bond years ago, had sworn never to take a mate after the woman meant for him died under a curse meant for the crown. He had sealed his heart, buried it with duty. So why did this scent reach him now? Why did it feel like a name he had forgotten but his soul still remembered? Elara, a voice whispered inside him. He froze. He had never spoken that name aloud. Kael turned sharply, scanning the empty chamber. No guards, no servants, only the cold walls and the restless night. This is madness, he said quietly. Yet the pull remained. A thread tightened around his chest, invisible but unbreakable. Against his will, his feet moved. Elara sank to her knees beside her bed. The warmth had grown stronger, spreading like dawn through her blood. Her hands trembled not from desire but from fear. She had no alpha, no guide, no one to help her through the awakening. She felt alone in a way that hurt deeper than hunger. Tears burned her eyes. I was rejected, she whispered. So why now? Her thoughts drifted, uninvited, to stories she had heard as a child about the Alpha King, about his strength, his cold justice, his eyes like storm-dark iron. She had seen him once from far away, riding through the village. He had not looked at her, not even for a moment. Still, her heart had remembered him. The warmth surged. Elara gasped, pressing her forehead to the floor, grounding herself in the stone. She focused on breathing, on staying present, on surviving. And then the door creaked. She looked up sharply. No one ever came at night. The wind died. Footsteps approached, slow and heavy, as if the earth itself moved with them. Her heart stopped. Kael stood outside the small stone house, staring at the door as if it were a battlefield. The scent was strongest here. There was no doubt now. This was not madness. This was the bond. His voice shook as he spoke into the silence. Open the door. Inside, Elara froze, that voice, deep, commanding, broken, her breath caught in her throat. Impossible. She rose unsteadily and moved toward the door, every instinct screaming both warning and welcome. Her hand rested on the wood. She opened it. The world changed. The moment their eyes met, something ancient awakened. Cale felt it like a blade through his chest. Alara felt it like a name being carved into her soul. They stared at each other, frozen between heartbeat and fate. "You," Cale said hoarsely. She dropped her gaze, trembling. "I'm sorry, my king," she whispered. "I didn't mean for this to happen." He stepped closer without meaning to. "You are the cause," he said, "and you don't even know it." Her eyes lifted, wide with fear and confusion. "I was rejected," she said softly. "No bond ever came." Cale's jaw tightened. "Then the bond waited," he replied. Silence fell between them, heavy and dangerous. Outside, the moon slipped behind a cloud. Inside, fate held its breath. And somewhere deep within the Alpha King's sealed heart, a truth cracked open. The Omega he had never chosen was the one destiny had chosen for him. The door closed behind them with a quiet sound, yet it felt louder than thunder. Alara stood frozen inside her small home, her hands tight at her sides. The Alpha King filled the narrow space like a storm trapped in stone walls. His presence was heavy, not with threat alone, but with something deeper, something that made her heart ache in a way she did not understand. Cale did not move closer. That alone surprised her. He stood near the door, shoulders tense as if crossing the room would break a rule written into his bones. His eyes, dark and sharp, stayed fixed on her face, not in anger, not in desire, in fear. "You should not be alone," he said at last. Alara swallowed. "I have always been alone, my king." The words were soft, but they struck him hard. Cale turned away slightly, his jaw tight. "That should never have happened." She shook her head. "It did." Silence stretched between them. Outside, the forest held its breath. Cale felt the bond pulling at him again, gentle, steady, unyielding. It was not loud, it did not demand, it waited. That was what frightened him most. "You do not know what this means," he said. Alara lifted her chin. "Then tell me." Her courage surprised him. Rejected Omegas were taught to stay quiet, to accept less. Yet she stood before him, unclaimed and unprotected, asking for truth from a king. Cale closed his eyes for a moment. "When a bond awakens," he said slowly, "it changes both lives. It brings strength, but also weakness. It ties fate to flesh." He looked at her again. "And it destroys those who are not ready." Alara's hands trembled, but she did not step back. "I am already broken, my king. I have nothing left to lose." That was a lie. Cale could sense it. Beneath her calm words was a heart still capable of hope and still able to be hurt. "You must leave this place," he said firmly. "At dawn." Her breath caught. "Leave. For your safety," he said, "and for mine." The bond pulsed, sharp and painful, as if it understood rejection better than either of them. Alara felt it too. A quiet ache spread through her chest, heavy and cold. "So you will deny it," she said. Cale's voice lowered. "I already have." She nodded once slowly, as if she had expected nothing else. "Then why are you still here?" she asked. He had no answer. At dawn, the castle gates opened. Alara stood among the guards, her small bundle held close, her eyes fixed on the ground. No one spoke to her. No one met her gaze. Above, from the high stone balcony, Cale watched. His crown rested on his head once more, heavy as iron. His hands were steady, but his heart was not. The bond stirred with every step she took away from the kingdom. He told himself this was mercy. That if she left, the bond would fade. That fate could be silenced. Yet when Alara crossed the outer bridge and vanished into the morning mist, Cale felt something tear inside him. The pain was sharp, real, unforgiving. The road beyond Blackstone was long and lonely. Alara walked until her feet burned and her breath came short. The world felt wrong, as if the sky had shifted and left her beneath unfamiliar stars. She tried to ignore the ache in her chest. She tried to believe the bond would weaken with distance. But each step only made it louder. At night, she dreamed of storm-dark eyes and a voice that spoke her name without sound. She woke shaking, her heart racing, her hands pressed to her chest as if holding something broken inside. On the third night, the dreams stopped. Something else replaced them. Whispers, not voices, feelings, pulls, a quiet sense of being watched. The forest grew thick around her, shadows deep and restless. Old magic stirred beneath the roots. Elara slowed, fear curling in her stomach. She was not alone. Back in Blackstone, chaos had begun. The Bond Kale tried to bury refused to stay silent. His strength faltered. His temper sharpened. The court whispered behind closed doors. The king is cursed again, they said. The crown has awakened something. Kale endured it in silence. But when his wolves began to grow restless, when the land itself responded to his unrest, he knew denial had failed. That night, he stood before the ancient mirror in the Hall of Kings. The glass darkened, showing not his reflection but Alara's face, pale, frightened, surrounded by shadow. Kale reached out instinctively. "Where are you?" he whispered. The Bond answered with pain. She was in danger. Alara ran. Branches tore at her cloak as she fled through the trees. The presence behind her moved fast, silent and cruel. She did not know what hunted her, only that it fed on weakness. She stumbled, falling hard to the forest floor. Tears burned her eyes. "I was rejected," she whispered into the dark. "Why won't fate let me go?" The ground shook. A roar split the night, deep, furious, alive. The presence vanished. Strong arms lifted her from the forest floor, holding her steady. She looked up, breath shaking. Kale stood before her, eyes glowing faintly, his expression torn between rage and relief. "I told you to leave," he said. Her voice broke. "I tried." The bond surged, no longer quiet. Kale closed his eyes and pulled her closer, not in possession but in protection. "This ends now," he said. Above them the moon burned bright. Fate had chosen, and it would not be denied again. Alara stood in the Alpha King's arms, her breath uneven, her body still shaking from fear. The trees around them leaned inward as if listening. Moonlight spilled through the branches, pale and watchful. Kale loosened his hold but did not let go. "You are hurt," he said. She shook her head slowly. "Only afraid." His jaw tightened. "That should never have happened." She looked at him then, really looked. Not at the crown, not at the legend, but at the man beneath the weight of both. There was something broken in his eyes, something tired. "Why did it come for me?" she asked. "That thing in the forest." Kale's gaze darkened. "Because of me." He turned away, helping her sit on a fallen stone. The air felt heavy, thick with old magic. "There are things about the crown that were never written in law," he said. "Things buried to keep the kingdom standing." Alara folded her hands together, listening. "When the first Alpha King took the throne," Kale continued, "he did so by force. He bound the land to his blood. The bond gave power, but it demanded payment." He paused. "Every generation, the crown chooses an Omega, one whose spirit can balance the weight of the throne." Alara's heart slowed. "And when the king refuses," she asked quietly. Kale's voice was low. "The crown breaks him, or it takes the Omega anyway." She felt the truth settle like cold stone in her chest. "That is why you rejected the bond," she said. "Not because you did not want it, but because you were afraid of what it would cost." He looked at her sharply. "Yes," he said, "because everyone I loved paid the price." Silence wrapped around them. Alara stood slowly. Her legs trembled, but her voice did not. "If the crown chooses an Omega," she said, "why choose me? I was rejected, unclaimed, forgot." Kale met her gaze. "Because the crown does not seek power," he said. "It seeks balance." She swallowed. "And you think I am that?" "I know you are," he replied. They returned to Blackstone before dawn. The castle gates opened at the Alpha King's command, but the guards looked uneasy. Whispers followed them through the halls. Alara felt every stare like a stone thrown at her back. Kale led her not to the royal chambers, but to the oldest wing of the castle, where the walls were darker, the air colder. "This place predates the throne," he said. "It remembers." They entered a round chamber carved with symbols worn by time. In the center stood a basin of black stone filled with still water. "The mirror of oaths," Kale said. "It shows the truth a crown tries to hide." Alara stepped closer, her reflection wavering. "What will it show me?" she asked. "Everything," he said. She looked back at him. "And you?" Kale nodded once. "Especially me." Together they placed their hands above the water. The surface rippled. The room darkened. Alara gasped as the vision took hold. She saw the first Alpha King, strong, proud, afraid. She saw him bind the land with his blood, calling the throne his by right. She saw the crown answer, glowing with power and hunger. Then she saw an Omega, gentle, bright, chosen. She saw the king turn away. "I will not lose you," he said. The crown cracked. The land screamed. From that moment the curse was born. Every king after paid the price in pieces: madness, loss, war. The crown took what it was owed, one way or another. Alara's vision shifted. She saw Kale as a younger man, kneeling beside a woman with kind eyes. She felt his love, deep and true. She felt the crown stir. Then the curse struck. The woman faded into shadow, stolen by the debt Kale refused to pay. Alara cried out, pulling her hand away. The vision vanished. Kale was on his knees. "I swore never again," he said hoarsely. "Never to let the crown take another innocent life." Alara knelt before him. "But by refusing," she said softly, "you only fed the curse." He looked at her, pain naked on his face. "Yes." That night the council gathered in secret. They did not invite the king. "The Omega must be removed," one elder said, "before the curse awakens fully." "She weakens him," said another. "The bond makes him vulnerable." Blades were sharpened in silence. Alara felt it before it happened. A cold wave passed through her chest, sharp and sudden. She gasped, gripping the edge of the bed in the small chamber Kale had given her. Something was wrong. The bond burned, not with warmth but warning. She rose and stepped into the hall. Footsteps echoed, too many. Kale's voice thundered from the far end. "Stop!" Steel flashed. Alara froze as guards rushed toward her. "No," Kale shouted. "She is under my protection." An elder stepped forward. "Then you have forgotten your duty, my king." The air trembled. Alara stepped past Kale, her hands raised. "Please," she said, "do not fight." Kale turned to her, alarmed. "Alara, don't." "I understand now," she said, meeting his eyes. "The crown wants balance, not blood." She faced the elders. "I will take the oath," she said. Kale's heart stopped. "There is no oath," he said. "Only sacrifice." She shook her head. "There is always another way." Before anyone could stop her, Alara turned and ran toward the Hall of Kings. Kale followed, shouting her name. She reached the ancient throne and placed her hand upon it. The crown flared with dark light. The curse answered. "Choose," the throne whispered. Alara closed her eyes. Kale reached her side, gripping her arm. "I will not lose you," he said, voice breaking. She looked at him, calm and certain. "Then trust me," she replied. The ground shook. The crown waited. And the fate of the kingdom hung on the choice of a rejected Omega. The throne hall trembled beneath their feet. Shadows of the past stretched across the stone walls, reaching for the present. The crown glowed, dark and restless, as though it breathed with its own life. Alara stood before it, her hand still resting lightly upon the ancient metal. Her heart pounded, not from fear, but from the weight of destiny pressing upon her. Every fiber of her being called out to her, warning her, guiding her, yet urging her forward. Kale reached her side. He did not touch her, not yet, but his presence was a shield, a promise. The bond between them pulsed with urgency. Every heartbeat of hers was echoed by his. The crown flared, sensing the connection, testing their resolve. "You do not know what this will cost," Kale said softly, almost a whisper, though it carried through the hall. His storm-dark eyes held both warning and longing. "I know," she replied, her voice steady. "I have felt it, every moment, every fear. But I also know that running changes nothing." Kale studied her, searching her face as if he might find doubt there. But he found only certainty, and it shook him to his core. He had spent years denying the bond, denying fate itself, afraid of losing everything he could not save. And now, facing her courage, he realized the truth he had long avoided. Sometimes, love demanded more than fear allowed. The crown pulsed violently, a deep, vibrating hum that seemed to echo in their bones. The air shimmered with magic, drawing every shadow in the hall toward them. The elders who had attempted to defy the bond fell silent. Even the stone walls seemed to hold their breath. Elara took a step forward, then another. Her hand lifted higher on the crown and she closed her eyes. Memories of her past, rejection, loneliness, fear, rose and fell like waves. She could feel the crown testing her heart, probing for weakness. Kale's hand brushed hers, not touching but close enough for warmth to cross the gap. "You are not alone," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "Whatever happens, I will face it with you." She opened her eyes, meeting his gaze. "I do not need you to fight for me," she said. "I need you to stand beside me, not for me but with me." The crown's light flared, a blinding white that erased shadows and history alike. It spoke, not in words but in a sense of inevitability. "Choose." Elara inhaled deeply. She felt the bond, the power, the curse, the weight of generations pressing on her shoulders. Yet beneath it all there was a pulse of hope. The throne had demanded balance, yes, but it had never demanded despair. She stepped fully to the crown and placed both hands upon it. The magic coursed through her, not like fire but like cold, deep water. Every fear, every loss, every rejection she had endured flowed into her consciousness. She did not resist. She did not fight. "I accept," she said clearly, her voice carrying through the hall. Not to serve the crown, not to wield power, but to heal what has been broken. The crown pulsed once, twice. Then slowly, the darkness receded. Shadows that had clawed at the walls melted into light. The elders' eyes widened, but no one moved. The curse, the ancient demand of the throne, had been met not by submission, not by fear, but by choice rooted in courage. Kale exhaled, a sound he had not realized he had been holding in for years. The bond between them hummed softly, like a river settling after a storm. He stepped forward, finally closing the distance. Their hands met over the crown, and a warmth unlike any power he had known flowed through them both. "Elara," he whispered, almost afraid to speak the name. You have done what I could not." She looked at him and a small, knowing smile touched her lips. "No, we did it together. The crown only reflects what we give it." The throne dimmed, its voice silent for the first time in centuries. The hall seemed to exhale. For the first time the kingdom felt alive, not bound by fear but by hope. Kale took her hand fully in his now, lifting it away from the crown. Their fingers intertwined naturally, like they had always belonged. For the first time in decades, he allowed himself to feel, not the weight of kingship alone, but the possibility of something more: companionship, trust, love. "You were always meant for this," he said quietly, "even when I could not see it." Alara's gaze softened, but there was steel beneath her warmth. "And you were meant to protect it even when you feared it. Fear is not failure, Kale. It is proof that we care." He nodded, the tension of centuries slipping from his shoulders. "Then we begin anew, together." The next morning, Blackstone awoke to a sky painted with gold and rose. The curse had lifted. The land itself seemed lighter. Streams glimmered where they had been dull. Wolves howled in the distance, not in warning but in celebration. The kingdom, once bound by fear, now breathed freely. Kale walked with Elara along the castle terraces, the wind tugging at their cloaks. Guards and courtiers watched in silence, unsure if they were witnessing a miracle or a myth come to life. "You should not be afraid of them," Elara said, sensing his hesitation. "You have faced kings, armies, and curses. A few whispers cannot harm you." Kale smiled faintly. "Perhaps, but I have not faced anyone like you before." She laughed softly. It was a sound that seemed to lift the weight from the air itself. "Then perhaps that is what the crown needed all along. Not strength, not power, but someone willing to see it for what it truly is, and someone willing to stand together through it. Kale's hand found hers again, a silent vow sealed in a touch. Then we face it together, always. And in that moment, the bond that had once caused fear became a bridge of trust, uniting them in ways neither could have predicted. Weeks passed and the kingdom began to heal. Ilara learned the ways of the land, not as a servant, not as a pawn, but as a partner. The people, wary at first, grew to respect her courage, her wisdom, her heart. The elders, humbled by the events, no longer questioned the bond. They saw it for what it was, a union that could restore balance to generations of pain. Kale, once closed and guarded, began to laugh again. He walked the halls freely, no longer a man shackled by the weight of inevitable loss. He learned to trust not just the bond, but himself, and the strength that comes from caring without fear. At night, when the moon rose high, Ilara would stand by the tallest tower and Kale would join her. They would speak little, letting the silence hold the weight of what they had endured and the hope of what they had built. One evening, the moon hung low, silver and patient. Ilara placed her hand gently over Kale's. "Do you remember the first time you stood before me?" she asked. He nodded, his eyes dark and soft. "I thought I could deny fate itself. And yet fate brought us here," she said. He smiled, a shadow of the old pain lingering but softened by hope. "And I am grateful, grateful that you are not only my bond but my strength." Ilara leaned closer. "Then we are even. The crown gave me fear. The world gave me pain, but together we gave each other choice." Kale's hand tightened over hers. "Choice," he repeated. "And now we begin not as king and omega or ruler and subject, but as partners, as equals, as home." The wind whispered through the towers, carrying their laughter and their promise to the distant forests. The land itself seemed to rejoice, free at last from the shadow of old curses. The bond pulsed softly, a heartbeat in the dark. It no longer demanded, no longer warned. It simply existed, steady, enduring, eternal. Kale looked at Ilara, and in her eyes he saw not only courage but the reflection of what he had longed for. Hope, trust, and love that could survive even the heaviest crown. Ilara looked at him, and in his gaze she saw protection, respect, and a quiet understanding that no rejection, no curse, no fear could ever sever. Together they turned to face the rising sun. The shadows of the past were behind them. The kingdom awaited the future. And they, united by choice, were ready.